You are listening to GeekFest Rants on the IC Robots Radio Network.
You have located GeekFest Rants, the entertainment podcast for genre geeks like you.
Shall we play a game?
Covering the world of vintage and current film and television since 2010.
Game over, man. It's game over.
Featuring in-depth conversations on sci-fi, horror, fantasy, comics, toys, and conventions.
So say we all. So say we all.
And now sit back, relax, and enjoy today's show.
We have always looked to the stars to discover who we are. And hidden there is a message. A secret made of space and time. Visible only to those open enough to receive it.
Captain Christopher Pike requests permission to come aboard.
Commander, this is awkward, but the best way to get into a cold stream is to jump right in. I'm here to take command of the Discovery under Regulation 19, Section C.
Your directive is only instituted when an imminent threat is detected.
Federation sensors picked up 7 red bursts, spread out across more than 30,000 light years. These mysterious signals are beyond anything we understand. Is it a greeting? A declaration of malice? Let's find out.
Aye, sir. Seconds to impact.
I am in total free fall.
Trust us. Discovery has you. Right, ladies?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, dear.
This is the power of math, people!
We have someone in common.
My foster brother, Mr. Spock.
He took leave. It says if he'd run into a question he couldn't answer.
Spock is linked to these signals, and he needs help. We're on a collision course with a pulsar.
Oh, what a relief. Thought we were all gonna die.
Wherever our mission takes us, we'll try to have a little fun along the way. Ruffle a few feathers.
I look forward to it.
Hit it. Excuse me.
Excuse me.
Excuse me.
Excuse me.
Linus, you okay? You look a little... Yes, I hear it's going around.
Bless you.
Hi, everybody, and welcome once again to GeekFest Rants. My name is Carlos Perone, and today we are going to take a deep dive into Star Trek Discovery. Joining me once again, I have co-host Steve Folks, who is going to help me go through the first season of Star Trek Discovery. We're going to examine the major plot points, the new characters introduced into this show, everything from the actors to the music to the special effects to even the short treks, these new little mini episodes that have been airing lately to prepare us for season 2. And as usual, we'll take a little trip back into the history of Star Trek and how we individually got involved in it. So let's begin with Star Trek Discovery.
Television is not the truth. Television is an amusement park. Television is a circus, a carnival, a traveling troupe of acrobats, storytellers, dancers, singers, jugglers, sideshow freaks, lion tamers, and football players. We're in the boredom-killing business.
Okay, today we are going to talk about Star Trek Discovery. Joining me today, I have Steve Folks, who was here with me a couple of episodes ago. Welcome back, Steve.
Thanks for having me back. Really looking forward to this one.
Cool. Star Trek Discovery. Before we talk about what's happening right now with the show, Let's start a little bit with the background in terms of, granted, this is a 50-year or even more than 50-year worth of history behind the show. And I'm sure you jumped in it at a different time than I did. My introduction to Star Trek was on reruns of the original series back in the, let's say, early 80s, 1980 and going forward. So as I'm watching these original Trek episodes, all of a sudden the movies are kind of bubbling up a little bit. I missed the motion picture in the theaters, but by the time Star Trek II came about, forget it. I was already going to the theaters and watching them and all that kind of stuff. And then, I kept going with the movies. And around 80, I don't even remember, 86, 87, when all of a sudden Next Generation started. And I've told this story in the past, and I'll tell it really fast just because you're here. I was able to visit the Next Generation set a few months before they started filming. I was a part of a trip that I took to California when I was in high school, I think. I was still in high school at the time. And, I started watching that show live, and then everything that followed, I just continued, through DS9, through Voyager, Enterprise, you name it. I continued with all these shows, watching them. It's hard for me to really tell you if there's a favorite. I mean, because I was watching it live, Next Gen it kind of resonates more with me. And because it kind of had a little bit of a springboard effect into some films, they kind of, have a closer connection. But I can definitely appreciate the original. I can look past the what sometimes could be considered, cheesy sets and stuff of the time. And then all the other shows that followed on TV, to me, they felt, not exactly of the high quality that I was feeling out of Next Generation, specifically the later seasons of Next Generation. It was a bit of a rough start. But, that's kind of how I progressed with the show. And yeah, there were some episodes in any of these shows that, you kind of like, oh God, this is just a rehash of that episode. And this is everything kind of goes back to the original. It almost felt like a lot of times like they're just rehashing all that old stuff, just changing the names around. But, I still loved it. I loved the idea, the original Gene Roddenberry idea of how this futuristic utopian kind of world existed where, yes, you still had conflicts, but theoretically we were able to work out a lot of our problems and be able to focus more on space exploration. What about you? When did you jump into all this?
Mine, yeah, similar to yours actually. Mine was it wasn't with the original series. Obviously, I didn't exist back then either. So so my first initial point of contact with Star Trek was with actually Star Trek the movie, First Contact, which I believe came out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. that was actually one of my first.
And that's an excellent movie.
Oh, that's a great movie. Yeah, it's one of my favorites still. The reason why this was my first point of contact with it, and the reason why I liked it so much was around that time, I was really big into Star Wars as a kid. I was playing, I had all these toys and everything. Star Wars was so big at that time, and Star Wars seemed to be on the uptick because we were getting these not even rumors anymore, but the fact that the new special editions were coming out. And they were going to be re-released within a few months of the release of First Contact. So I was, hyped up on the Star Wars mania. I mean, I wouldn't say to satiate myself, but I guess to kind of like look at something that seemed very similar to me. I found Star Trek, and I saw the fact that there was this movie called First Contact. And so, I remember seeing it in theaters, and I was like, wow, this is great, it's so cool. And at the time when I was so young, I didn't really see the difference between Star Trek and Star Wars. I just saw, they were just science fiction things in space with lasers, and so to me it was all the same. To me it was just great. So looking back now, it was like night and day.
Well, that's an excellent start point because First Contact, as far as I'm concerned, is like the equivalent of Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan when it comes to the Next Generation crew. It is the best one of that crew.
Yeah, definitely. I think if each crew had a certain gold standard, I think First Contact would be for the Next Generation crew, while Wrath of Khan was for the original series. And so just to go through quickly. So from there, I gotten more on board after since seeing First Contact. I went all Star Wars all the way, But later on, when Enterprise debuted, I was much older. I had sort of, easily separated the differences between the two franchises. And so it was with Enterprise, where it was my first Star Trek, where I sat through it from, season 1, episode 1, all the way to the end. Yeah. And I would watch it with my sister, and every Wednesday when it would come on, we'd watch the entire series. So, and then from there, I went back and watched, the older series, and actually right now, I'm actually, as we speak, I'm going through a Deep Space Nine rewatch, and I'm on season 5 of that.
Now, how did you watch them before? Were you renting them DVD or VHS, or what format, or streaming them? I don't know. How did you do that?
I found a lot online a few years ago, back when I was starting to watch Enterprise. I think I tried to find as many as I could online. I don't recall renting any. The only thing I rented, I think, was maybe one of the movies, I believe. So a lot of it was just online from what I found. A lot of early episodes were posted randomly before YouTube was such a conglomerate, really.
Well, it's interesting because with Next Generation, that was the last time that Gene Roddenberry was involved. And he kind of let things go pretty soon after the show started because he got sick and different producers kind of took over and that sort of thing. And he always had a lot of friction with Paramount and trying to get things his way. And then I remember with DS9, it was a show where instead of going out to find the action would come to you because, they're coming to that space station all the time. And there was some controversy at the time because there was another show close to the premiere of DS9, which was Babylon 5, which is another super favorite show of mine, that had a similar storyline about a space station where all the action comes to the space station. And it was pitched, I believe, to many, many studios, and it was rejected. And then all of a sudden, they went and did it on their own. And then Paramount turns around and says, hey, we got an idea. We're going to do a show about a space station. I was like, oh my God, these guys they're all copying. And up to this day, it still remains like a point of contention with the producers of that show. So again, it was a different structure. You had your lead character who had a son in the show. So a different dynamic. And that was a show also that started out at a certain level and then it changed. It became a darker, more menacing kind of show because of all these wars that were happening. So, and I do remember one of the executive producers was Ronald D. Moore, who then went on to do Battlestar Galactica, the reboot, which again, you can kind of see his style. Then with Voyager, let me just think for a minute. With Voyager, it had a completely different tone. It was just trying to get back. So it's always trying to get back. And then unfortunately with a show with that premise, you're always kind of stuck in this mode where you can't have them get back because the show ends, so they always kind of get a little bit closer, but not close enough. And sometimes you can kind of see when the ratings started to slip, they were like, oh, we're getting really closer now. It's really, really close. So you can kind of see that as the show was finishing, they were kind of getting them closer and closer to the destination. And the funny thing about Enterprise, which has something very similar to Discovery, is that with Enterprise, I remember they promoted the hell out of the fact that this is the show where you're going to find out about how the whole Klingon war started, how this whole Federation Klingon thing. And at first they did a little bit of it, but then for whatever reasons, I imagine for ratings or different storylines, they kind of abandoned that whole Klingon thing and went into more traditional, space adventure type of stuff. Do you remember that whole pitch about it being more of a Klingon-y type of thing?
Yeah, and that was actually something that sort of piqued my interest as well. Whereas, they wanted to go really heavy into the Klingon backstory, but then it just kind of fizzled, which is still kind of puzzling to me. And just to get back to your other point about DS9 and sort of the atmosphere of it, and because it's so recent in my mind, because I've really been watching it for the last maybe 2 or 3 months now. Yeah, wow. It is a very, very different style of from the previous two series because, like you said, it just is very isolated and very encapsulated, on the station, and the station itself almost becomes like a part of the show itself. But by the time you get to the end of the 4th season and into the 5th, it's very dark. They have the themes of it are, the whole Cardassian and Bajoran relationship is. The characters just really jump up to a different notch, really. Everyone has like these...
And the Dominion War and the Jem'Hadar and all that stuff.
Yeah. And it really... Like, each character now, instead of becoming more... And I hate to say that the original series, the characters were sort of static, but they didn't really have arcs, and they didn't really grow. I mean, to the extent where, in DS9, by the end of the series... many of the characters are in very different positions than from when they started. And I always liked that. I really enjoyed that type of storytelling.
Right, and he also, because they're so far away, I guess, from the Federation, they're not all these clean-cut, here's the good guys, here's the bad guys. With DS9, you always had, well, what is this guy really up to? I know he's supposed to be a good guy, but all of a sudden you find out this history of all these weird things that this particular character might have done, and how you kind of start to see them on a different light and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And furthermore, they also have the fact that because, like you said, they're so far away from the core Federation, you have the characters themselves having to sort of make these decisions that, are sort of questionable, really. And that's to say, for example, like Cisco, like he has to sort of come to grips with making, some decisions that might not jive completely with how the Federation would handle it if he were closer, to home. But he has to sort of make these decisions, out on the frontier, so to speak, which is always pretty interesting.
Yeah. Now, as these shows came and went, we started to hear the rumblings again of some kind of new, because there's always some new Star Trek thing, and there's always a chance that it's going to be a TV show. They always hint at another possible rebooting of a TV show, but instead, what happened was after the original crew did all their movies, and then the next gen people did all their movies, we had the J.J. Abrams reboot, which it's more than a reboot, it's an alternate universe, so it kind of is able to exist on a separate realm as to everything else. This way it doesn't kind of contradict itself. And those had, I believe, 3 movies. The first one very successful, the second one very controversial. A lot of people had a bad reaction to that one, and the third one was kind of good, but forgettable. Like, it didn't really generate any traction. And that was more or less almost around the time of the 50th anniversary. And everybody was wondering, what's going to happen for the 50th anniversary? Are they going to put out some kind of major announcement of something different coming, another movie or something? And instead of going the movie route, they made the announcements that they were going to come up with another show, which is what leads us to Star Trek Discovery. Now, this show, more than any other show, and maybe it's because I don't know so much about the production or the problems with production of the earlier shows, but this show seemed to have so many problems getting started. Originally, you had Brian Fuller and Alex Kurtzman as the executive producers, as the showrunners, basically. And the plan off the bat was this was going to be a CBS production that was going to be the flagship, I guess, of their new streaming service, because right now, as everybody knows, we're in a streaming madness. Everybody and their grandmother has a streaming service. So this was the way that they were going to, launch a new streaming service for CBS. And Brian Fuller, this is somebody who has the pedigree, as far as I'm concerned, having to do with Star Trek, because he was one of the people that did DS9. He did Voyager. He also did Heroes, if you guys remember Heroes in NBC. Then more recently, he did Hannibal, the Silence of the Lambs television show, which inspired television, which I absolutely loved. And he was also in the process, at the same time as he was doing Discovery, he was doing American Gods for Stars, I believe. And from what I understand, his idea for the show was a little different. He wanted to do kind of like an anthology, kind of like what American Horror Story or Fargo, these shows that are doing season-long stories, and then they do a completely different story with different people sometimes on the second season and the third season, because he wanted to be able to hop around all the different timelines of Star Trek without being, pigeonholed into one story, one continuous, timeline. And as he got the show kind of started, he started to have a lot of problems with CBS, the studio, to the point where he kind of said, all right, that's enough. We can't do this anymore. I'm going on my own. Or they either asked him to leave or he left or something like that, because he just couldn't do it, because again, at the same time, he was trying to produce another show. So they brought in a whole bunch of people. He brought in a whole bunch of people while they were having problems. And after he left, all the people he brought in to help put the show together, they were either let go or quit, which left us with Kurtzman, his original partner. Now, he also has, again, pretty good pedigree. He wrote the movie The Island for Michael Bay, some of the Transformer films, I believe, the J.J. Abrams Star Trek Into Darkness. He wrote also The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and he directed most recently, I guess you can call it a bit of a bomb, which was the Mummy with Tom Cruise. So as it stands now, Kurtzman is the only one of the original people that is involved with that show. And I remember hearing the stories about how the show kept getting delayed a little more because they needed more time and because they kept losing showrunners and that sort of thing. And at the time, they had also brought in Nicholas Meyer, the director of Star Trek II and Star Trek VI, to kind of help with the show also. And I think one of the sons of Roddenberry is also involved with the show, as an advisor or producer or whatever. They give everybody executive producer titles just to make them happy these days. But, they brought in a lot of people. And I honestly, based on the information that we were given and how the show was progressing and how it was delay after delay after delay, and the only thing you would hear is, "Oh, we're just trying to make the show the best possible." It's the regular line a studio gives you. "We're trying to make things as best as possible, so you guys have a good show on your hands." I swear I was very doubtful, as to what the show was going to be like, because there was just so many. The writing on the wall wasn't very good. How about you? Did you remember hearing any of those stories?
Oh yeah, I did actually. And the funny thing is, when the news of this really started breaking about how the first time it got pushed back, I didn't really have my ear to the ground, that much about it. So it wasn't until it really started to kind of snowball and pick up where I was like, well, what's going on? Because I heard they were making a Star Trek, a new series, and it was pretty exciting because I haven't had one since Enterprise. So I knew about it, but I didn't really have my eye focused on it. But until I kept hearing more and more about these delays and these setbacks, I was like, you started raising my eyebrows, like what's going on?
Exactly.
And the thing is, I guess back then, I guess a bit more naive. I guess I was still excited for it, and it surprised me the fact that what I thought at the time was such a big production company would have so much trouble. I mean, it would be like like Star Wars having production trouble. Imagine that. But
now we're kind of used to it.
And also I do want to say this though, but I think the fact that right now we hear about all this stuff about production issues and behind the scenes drama, because it's so easy to get access to this. I think if we were back in the 1960s, and I think we would have heard about a ton of behind the scenes drama just the same, even with the original Star Trek. I don't think it would have been all roses and sunshine.
I agree. I would say internet. Once the internet started, forget it. The cat's out of the bag. Everybody knows everybody's dirty underwear.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I think some of it, to a certain degree, may just be overblown, and some of it might be normal production that we just aren't used to seeing, but now we're kind of you think about it, so many shows now and movies are having these production issues, but so you have to think that I'm not sure if that's something new, or the fact that we just have our eyes focused and ears focused on it, because thanks to the internet, nothing stays hidden anymore.
And from the beginning, because they gave Fuller so much leeway in being able to develop the show and get it started, I don't know if from the beginning they kind of knew that they were going to, part ways, but he was able to design the show in terms of, he said, this is going to take place about 10 years before the Kirk era that we know, and it's not going to be in the Kelvin timeline. It's not going to be the J.J. Abrams timeline. It's going to be the classic, timeline that we're aware of. And off the bat, everybody understood, he was saying, it's not going to be about the captain of the show. It's going to be about somebody who's a bit lower in command than the captain. At the time, they were thinking African-American woman or maybe Latino woman. You're going to have a gay character. You're going to have a lot of aliens. So I remember around that time when they were mentioning those things, it was also the beginning of where nowadays we're hearing a lot more of the grumblings of, wait a minute, why are they doing this to my Star Trek? Why do they have to change my stuff? There was a period of that.
The gatekeepers came out.
Yeah, it was like, no, that's not my Star Trek. My Star Trek has to be Kirk, it's got to be a guy, and the woman's on the back, on the back row there somewhere, and I don't want to hear about any alternate characters or anything like that. No, but we kind of went through this already once, I remember. During Battlestar Galactica, the reboot, the fact that they were changing the genders of a lot of characters, people were freaking out. And then, little by little, people started to catch on to the show because it was an excellent show. Here, already they were having problems behind the scenes, and there were some grumblings off the bat. You can't ignore that was already happening. So let's just go through. Before we hit the actual stories, let's go through some of these characters, because like I said, it was purposely made this way. There were interviews I read with Fuller saying that, he always thought of Star Trek, if you go back to the Gene Roddenberry days, as a progressive show. It's not about going backwards in time in that manner, regressing, it's about progressing and being more inclusive and all that kind of stuff. So the actress they picked, let me see if I get her name right, Sonequa Martin Green. I only knew her from The Walking Dead because I watched The Walking Dead. Have you ever heard of her before?
No, actually, surprisingly not. I mean, I was loosely familiar with The Walking Dead, but I hadn't watched it since the first 2 seasons.
Oh, okay.
So I'm assuming she came later on in the series.
Oh, yeah. She was definitely later on in the series. And it's funny because it was around that time where she was announced where they kind of had to kill off her character. And it was like, I'm pretty sure they killed off her character because she wanted to hop to another show.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So it all happened right around the same time. Then you have, let's see, Doug Jones as Saru. He's the alien guy. Let's see, his race is a Kelpian. You might know him, I think, if I'm thinking of the right actor. He did a couple of the Guillermo del Toro films. He played Sapien, I think, in Hellboy, and he was also, I think, in Pirates of the Caribbean. I think he played that squid-looking guy. I forget his name. Davy Jones, I think.
Yeah. He's I think in the prosthetic monster universe. He's a pretty prolific actor. He does a lot of that kind of stuff. And this is an alien creature we haven't seen yet. It's a brand new alien creature. And the thing about his character is that because of the way he grew up and the way of his people, he can sense death coming, not necessarily to himself, but to the whole group. So that's something that they kind of play on every now and then. Then you have, here we go, another name for me to try to pronounce, Shazad Latif, who plays, I'm going to say right now, Ash Tyler. He plays another character that we're going to talk about later. But all we need to know at this point is that he is going to be a prisoner of war, let's say, that they find in a Klingon detention center, and that he's brought onto the show, but he's got a mysterious past and having to do with, all the POW related stuff that's happening in the show. I had never seen him before. How about you? I've never heard of him before. I've never heard of him before, never saw him before, which is very fitting to his character later on.
Yeah. I'll tell you a quick story. I was blown away by the twist, and I did not fully understand the twist until today. As I'm researching the show, I'm like, wait a minute. Are you telling me this is this and that's that? I'm like, oh my God. I was like, I can't believe this. How did I miss that? Let's see, another character here, another actor, Anthony Rapp, who plays Paul, who is the chief engineer. You always have a chief engineer. And again, a very controversial character because he is not only the first openly gay character for a television Star Trek show, because we did have something like that already. I believe it was in one of the last Star Trek films, very brief.
Yeah, he's very subtle.
He's also very subtle, very, like a last minute type of addition to the movie. But he's also played by an openly gay actor, which is something that is, very important to not just represent a specific type of person, but have them play by that actual type of person, not just somebody pretending to be something. You know what I mean? So it's kind of neat how they were able to do that. And again, these are the little rumblings that some people all automatically get turned off by the show. And it's like, well, no, just watch it, see how they handle it. And that was, he's very important because of the actual technology that we're going to be dealing with in this show. It becomes very important. Then you have Mary Wiseman, who plays Tilly. Now, she is kind of like, she's described as a cadet in her final year. So I think she kind of takes the role where other shows would have been done by some kind of naive kid. That's the kind of role she plays because she's always saying the wrong thing and she's very, all over the place and, always putting her foot in her mouth. I mean, do you get that feeling?
Yeah, definitely. And I think she was definitely written that way, on purpose. But surprisingly, from what I've gathered, she's become like a crowd favorite, really. Yeah, in fact, she's going to have her own book out. The character is going to be a book based on her character in February. She became really a cult favorite from Discovery.
Well, I think the reason is because in a lot of these shows, the fans, again, if you look at typical geek nerd culture, your fan is not the captain of the ship. The fan is usually a kid who's watching what's happening and is not as cool as everybody else. And on earlier shows, when you have a kid, that's the person that you might be seeing the show through a kid. Here, because they don't have a kid, she kind of fits that role because it's the person that's unsure of themselves and the person that is making mistakes and is looking to other people, for advice and for, role models and that kind of thing. And I think that's why she's becoming a very popular character with the show. Another big role here is Jason Isaacs, who he's done a million films. He's Harry Potter, everything. British actor, again, pulling off a Southern accent, which these British actors are incredible, how they can pretend to be just about anybody and they pull it off. Another character that has a huge twist that I did not suspect that, the type of twist that they threw at you in this first season, I normally would expect a show to take 3 or 4 seasons to pull something like what they did. So he's now he is the captain of the Discovery here, but he's not, like we mentioned earlier, he's not the lead. Let's see, Wilson Cruz, medical officer. Okay, this is the partner of the engineer, whom... let's just say something happens to him that, again, very shocking, but from what I understand, he is be continuing in some shape or form with the show, which we're going to find out. And the last one I'm going to mention is not because we've seen him, but because we've seen the trailers. Anson Mount as Christopher Pike. They are introducing quite a number, and they even announced already that there's a guy who's going to be playing Spock. There's also a guy who's already been playing Sarek. Anson Mount, I remember him from Hell on Wheels, and more recently, Marvel's The Inhumans that was canceled. He was the lead on that show too, so he is a known face, and he is your typical, square jaw, blue eyed Kirk analog, and he's playing Pike. So we're going to see him pretty soon. Now, let's talk a little bit about the storyline. This is a 15-episode series. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you remember? What are the major arcs that we're dealing with in this show?
All right, so the story itself, I think, is where it suffers the most from the production issues, because the story itself, it seems like it tries to do a bunch of things all at once, but it sort of misses the mark on a few of them, in my opinion. But so what we have in the beginning is basically the beginnings of what's been known as basically the Klingon War between the Federation and Klingons. And that's where it begins. It begins with this event called the Battle at the Binary Stars.
Right, because first contact already occurred during Enterprise.
Oh, yeah. So there was this battle, and the lead character, Michael Burnham, she sort of initiates, by mistake, by accident, a confrontation, a standoff, if you will, between one of the Federation ships called the Shinzu and another Klingon ship that's only known as the Sarcophagus ship, mysteriously. And this takes place in like this binary star field. And by the way, the visuals on this show are just stunning.
My God, I was going to mention that it is movie level, cinematic level effects. They're just unbelievable. I can't get over how good stuff looks.
It really blew me away, because I was thinking, okay, we're gonna have like a few shots, here and there outside. No, like they have these sweeping big moments of CGI, eye candy. But either way, this battle takes place. The Federation holds its own, but there's just too many Klingon ships, and the Klingons basically take out most of the Federation fleet.
And that's an ongoing arc. That's an arc that has been continuing, even though the show has been taking some turns here or there. That's the ongoing story that goes through the entire season. We always come back to some Klingon problem, because at the same time as we're having battles with Klingons, the Klingons are fighting amongst themselves. They're trying to unite the what they call the 24 houses, this political way that they kind of divide themselves, but they're backstabbing each other and doing all kinds of weird stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, so war is definitely the sort of background of this whole series so far, where they have the individual episodes have their more or less stories that are going on, but the major overall arc is the war with the Klingons. So this event takes place, and that deals with the first 2 episodes. In the third episode, we get sort of a fast forward, if you will, a few months.
Let me just say something so people understand, and I always try to say this first. We are going to talk about some spoiler material here because we're going to assume that whoever's listening to this has already seen the first season. And a lot of these twists and shocks that I mentioned earlier, we are going to discuss them. So let's tell them the fact that, first of all, the first ship that she was on, the Shenzhen, that gets destroyed. And as a result of the war starting, she's imprisoned. And that's when you get that jump. She's kind of brought back to service. She's requested by somebody.
Yep, and just to dive into a little more, the reason why she's arrested is twofold, really, because she's sort of was seen as starting the war, as well as creating basically a mutiny on board
with her captain
on board the Shenzhou. Yeah, she sort of knocks out her captain, basically.
But in the process, she also at some point is able to inflict damage on the Klingons with the captain's help, but the captain gets fatally wounded during that mission, and the captain dies. So that's the end of the captain, and she's completely devastated by what happened.
Yeah, the background is that Michael Burnham has been kind of like the sort of quote unquote daughter to Captain Georgiou for quite some time. So
right. And then we also find out a little more of the background of Michael Burnham, the fact that she is kind of like an adopted daughter of Savick, also, just like he has Spock on one side, he has her also as an adopted daughter. And through the series, we find out how those two kids diverged in two different paths, and how you could kind of say that Spock was more his favorite because he was able to get him access to the Vulcan Academy or something, and she didn't. She ended up going in a different direction, I guess, towards the Federation. So there's always going to be this thing between her and her adopted father. But I believe they mentioned something like the reason her parents originally died was as a result of a Klingon attack, right?
Yeah, her parents were killed by Klingons. So it sort of gives her the sort of animosity she needs to sort of, I guess, feel so hostile towards the Klingons.
Now, the reason she is brought out is, again, because she's specifically requested by Lorca, because he's running some kind of experiments with some new technology, and he kind of wants her help to be able to hopefully, if they can perform these experiments and get this new, I think they called it a spore drive, they can kind of get the hopefully get an edge on the Klingon war, because they're getting the butt kicked left and right here or there.
Yeah, and this was when this is around episode 3 now we're talking about, and this is when I really started getting on board with the show, because now they're talking about really cool ideas. It's new stuff where it's not really, this wasn't really seen in any of the Star Treks that I watched. This is new. This is like new uncharted territory for me. So when they started talking about like the mycelial drive, I was like, wait,
what?
What? So then that spawned off like this whole research I was doing on like spores and mushrooms, and I was literally doing research about a fictitious engine drive. And this is the thing where I was a bit disappointed, because they started setting up all these pieces. Like they would have like scenes in the show that they didn't really come back to, because it felt like there were so many hands in the development of the show. Like it felt like certain things were set up for one person, and then when it switched hands, they just never really took that away. They just kept everything everything in the kitchen sink into the show.
And the technology of the spore drive, eventually, it started out as an episode where you have like the monster of the week. They have to figure out what this monster is.
Yeah.
And then later they realized the monster has something to do with these spores. And then they kind of shifted it. Okay, the spores then have something to do with the engineer. Okay, so he can kind of channel these spores, and he's kind of connected into the machine, into the engine, into everything. So that was a little bit of a handing off of a premise from one place to another. And it's like, okay, is that where we are now? But granted, it keeps changing, because obviously this technology is never mentioned in any future stuff. So I imagine sooner or later this technology is going away.
Yeah, and not to jump way too far ahead, but that last short trek, which we'll come back to at the end of the show, but that last short trek touched upon something there, maybe. So
yeah. Now, again, as we know more and more about these characters, a couple of other little highlights come about. They introduced the character of Harry Mudd, played by Rainn Wilson, I guess, from The Office. He's a very funny character, very funny actor. I kind of liked his character. I hope they bring him back again because he's such a dislikable slime ball, basically. And he's very essential in giving us more of the backstory and how we meet the character of Ash Tyler, who, like I said earlier, he's a POW, and he also develops a romantic interest with Burnham. But then we learn some really, really weird stuff that took place. How did you feel about his introduction?
When I saw this episode, I didn't see the original rendition of Mudd. So this to me, this to me was like, I was like, oh wow, this is a really cool character. I really like this guy, and he plays the perfect foil to Ash Tyler because we meet these two guys at the same time. So where I think if they would have had us be introduced to Ash Tyler by himself, I think it would have raised some alarm bells. Because Mudd was introduced as well, at the same time as Ash.
It distracts you a little bit.
It's the perfect sleight of hand where don't look at this, look at this wacky character over here, and it distracts you to the point where you forget about Ash and you root for this guy because of how criminally insane Harvey Mudd is. So but I love the character. I think he played him, I think Rainn played him spot on. He wasn't so over the top as he was in the original series.
No.
But
the original series is like a Broadway play, like a musical almost.
Exactly.
Like it's like, wow, these guys are so over the top.
They're really hamming it up. But I think Rainn did a perfect blend of the character. I really hope we see him again.
Yeah. And what's also happening here is that certain characters like Ash Tyler and Lorca there's something about him that you learn early on. He's got some weird tics and some weird things that are happening to him. He has a certain affliction with light, like light bothers him. And it's also as a result of something that happened to him. So they are throwing this veil of suspicion early on about a lot of characters that you don't know where they're going to go with them. And little by little, we start to find out what's going on. Now, one of the biggest other story arcs, and again, this is familiar territory. We've been here before. We had the Creature of the Week, we have the Klingons, we have Harry Mudd, obviously. Now we have the Mirror Universe, the Mirror Universe, which it's one of these things where on previous Star Trek shows, I always would think, oh, they're doing Mirror. Why are they doing Mirror? And it's like, okay, well, let's get it over with. Let's get the Mirror episode over with so we can move on with the show. Here, for whatever reason, and again, I think it's because I like the show so much, I didn't mind it as much. And they spent quite a bit of time here because through the Mirror universe that they show us here, we then start to get all these twists that lead us to the finale of the first season. Let's talk about Lorca first. One of the things we find out is that the Lorca that we've known since the beginning of episode 1, well, episode 3 really, is not Lorca. He is a mirror version of Lorca that somehow made it to this universe and is kind of doing stuff behind the scenes to be able then to come back and politically get the upper hand in his mirror world. Why don't you, if you remember, tell us a little bit about how this mirror world is different?
Well, as with every mirror universe, everyone has mustaches apparently. but this story, and by the way, Lorca is probably my favorite character on the whole show. I think he really stole the show. But and the fact that he was so nuanced and just like every episode was just like so bizarre, and he's just so you don't know which way he's gonna go. They set it up in a way that he's not evil. You cannot say from day one he's an evil character, but his motivations are so shadowy and murky.
He's a great actor. He's a top-notch actor. That's the thing.
He really is. And when you have like this sort of not nefarious, but just so shadowy, motivation behind the character. And
it's his Harry Potter street cred that's always there. That's the problem.
Exactly. Yeah, you look at him, you're like, something's going on quite right. But his interactions with everyone is so nuanced, and they set it up in a way so like you can tell there's always like a deeper layer to what he's talking about. And one of the things is where he's talking with one of the admirals, Admiral Cornwall, and you can tell they have a relationship together from the past. And you can tell he's not being upfront with her. You can tell he's still hiding something, and that sets up, and it sets it up perfectly. Where and they have these great shots of him, looking into the reflection, and kind of really kind of giving you the hint that something's not quite right about this character. And it's not overdone. It's not like in your face, like, oh, he's a bad guy. He's like, he's this mustache trolling, villain. But you can tell something's not quite right with him. And yeah, so he has this other version of himself in the mirror universe,
which we haven't met, because I think they said he's presumed dead.
Yeah.
At least the one that came from our world to their world. But I don't believe that for 1 minute.
I actually think it is. If you don't see a body, how's the line go? If you don't see the body,
and you can't. And this is an actor. He's a top-notch actor. I doubt they only hired him for 1 season. He's going to come back in some shape or form, because the original Lorca is going to somehow be trapped in the mirror universe and come back, I think, in some shape or form, because by the end of this one, they killed him off, basically.
Yeah, and unfortunately, because I really enjoy his character, but I think the initial idea was that he really was going to last 1 season, and they technically did kill the original Prime universe Lorca, not to get too confusing, but I think because he was just so popular, and like you said, it's such as like a big name to the show. I think they are going to find a way to bring the Prime Lorca back into the show itself. Yeah, but he's just a great actor overall, and he really brought something extra to the cast.
The biggest flip here is that in this Mirror universe, the alliances are completely different. Earth is the bad guy. The Klingons are good guy. They're like in a good alliance, and a lot of people are flipped around, and all of a sudden, the captain of the Janzun, she is alive, and she becomes a very important character, because we saw her die. The Prime one died, and now the new one, the evil one, she's now living in our universe, because she's going to be helping the Federation, hopefully win the war against the Klingons.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The mirror universe is usually, more or less, obviously judging from the name, a sort of a flip of whatever is going on in our Prime universe. So in the mirror universe, the Federation is being basically, it's not even called the Federation, it's called the Terran Empire.
Yeah.
And they're basically sort of the big mustache trolling villains of their universe. And it's ruled by someone, called the Empress. And we find out it's Giorgio, who was killed, like you said, in our Prime universe. So basically everything is flipped. And when they go into the mirror universe, completely by accident, well, no, it's by design.
It was Lorca.
It's by Lorca, He was basically the mastermind who, through all this time, the reason why it was so hinted that he had something up his sleeve is because he wanted to get back to his universe, which is the mirror universe. Correct. So he very, very cleverly manipulates these turn of events that basically gets the Discovery to basically jump into the mirror universe. And from there, he wants to then meet up with, basically reclaim what he was pulled away from in the mirror universe.
Exactly. And the other big twist that I talked about earlier, that I knew something was up, but I didn't know they were going to go that far, is that Ash Tyler turns out to be, a sleeper agent, I guess, for like a Manchurian candidate type of agent for the Klingons. But he looks totally human. So the story is that he voluntarily had surgical alterations done to his body in order to look human, but he's really a Klingon. But all his memories have been kind of hidden, so it's part of his cover. But that I understood. I got that. And that totally blew me away, because all these memories of him being tortured, and it's even implied that he was practically, I guess, raped at some point by a Klingon woman, let's say. It's not really that. It's that he was Klingon. So I think the implication is that he was having relations with other Klingons because he's a Klingon. And it wasn't really bad in terms of, it wasn't torture, it wasn't anything like that. It was just the things that it's almost like a Bourne Identity kind of character, where he willingly goes through all this torturous medical stuff, for the mission. And that completely floored me. Did you understand that? Because I was like, what?
But yeah, by this time in the series, I was so into it because we're now talking about we're about halfway through this season now. So I was so into it. I was like doing all this, like watching reviews and going through all this stuff. So I was following it 100%, and there's a lot of theories going around. There's actually even an interesting one because a lot of people were so thrown by this that they were doing a lot of digging around on sites like IMDb to see if they can find out the actor because we didn't mention this before, but there's another character in the show called Vok, and Vok is a Klingon.
Yeah, and why don't you tell everybody who he really is?
yeah. So Vok is a Klingon, but he
and we saw him in the beginning of the series. He's this Klingon who's like nobody likes him. He looks a little different. He comes from a family that has like no title, but then he kind of volunteers when their leader dies. He volunteers to help. And they're like, yeah, whatever, let him do it. He's we don't like him anyway. And he's like this guy who just wants to please everyone,
Yeah, and he actually has, I think he has like the right to lead the Klingons, but no one recognizes him because he has no house or something to that effect. And so he disappears. The character for a good 3 episodes, we don't see hide nor hair of him. So, and then all of a sudden, we have this new character, Ash Tyler, appear.
Right.
So people started scratching their heads like, okay. So he says, as it turns out, Ash Tyler is what is, well, I would say is or was.
That
is
character,
Vok.
that specific character. And like I mentioned earlier, I figured that out today. I'm like, wait, because I understood he was a Klingon, but I never made the connection that he was also that first Klingon we saw earlier in the show. And later I started reading some stuff, and I noticed they were saying something like they purposely gave that actor a phony name, a phony acting name, which is a derivative, I think, of his, like he was saying, like his father's name or something, just to throw people off the scent. And it is him.
Which was... Yeah, which was really clever. Yeah, I mean, because again, in this day and age, it's very hard to keep any sort of secret. So I really think they really tried to really hide that as much as possible.
And if you think about it, they could have also had the Klingon played by a different actor so that it could throw people even more off the scent. But I guess if you put him under makeup, then it becomes more official that they fooled us, that they completely fooled us. But yeah, that is definitely, and again, I mean, I have a feeling that they're not done with the Mirror Mirror universe because they have to resolve a lot of these characters that are now interwoven with this universe. Like I said, I'm still convinced Lorca is going to come back. The other Lorca is going to show up at some point. The other captain now, the evil version, she's hopping around here trying to help us with the Klingon War. So I don't think we're done.
Oh, no, definitely not. Not with the Mirror Universe. I mean, just by design, I think you have to, because I can't imagine, the Empress still sticking around for no good reason. There's going to be something that's going to come up and tie us back into the Mirror Universe. And in fact, even the medical Dr. Colbert, something happens to him.
Yeah, well, let's just say it because we are spoiling everything. Ash Tyler, as part of his awakening to who he really was, he kills him.
Yeah, and I don't think it was like anything intentional. I don't think he woke up and mean to kill him, but I think he woke up and was like so like in such like a frantic, mentally, this mental state of his, he kind of like reached out and just like, snapped his neck basically.
But we saw his character, like I mentioned earlier, return. I don't know if you want to call him a ghost or an apparition or some kind of other ethereal presence where he is able to kind of communicate with the engineer.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So I don't think we're done with him. I think he's definitely coming back.
Now, towards the end of the series, as I believe they're performing like one final jump because the engineer is, and I keep calling him the engineer, let me call him by his proper name, Paul. His name is Paul.
Yep, Paul Stamets.
He's having problems because, again, maybe this is how they get rid of this technology to kind of write it off, to kind of course correct. It's making him sicker and sicker and sicker, but he's able to perform like one crazy last, like I think they were saying like 131 micro jumps or something, some insane number. He performs like one additional one, which ends with all of a sudden their ship, the Discovery, approaching the Enterprise. And it's like, here we go. Now we're being connected completely connected. And at the time, I don't think we knew this exactly, but later on when we started to see the trailers for what was coming, it's Captain Pike.
Yeah, and that final scene of the two ships, nose to nose was just. I was like, I mean, and I'm not that much of a fanboy where it's like it's the Enterprise, but still. Just something about the music and the way it's shot is just. I really just got like a chill. Like, oh man, that is pretty awesome.
Especially when, for example, now you see the Enterprise, the television Enterprise, being done with modern effects, under those conditions. It feels so natural it being there.
Yeah, exactly. And I know a lot of people, there's a lot of people who do not like this show and they feel like everything about it is bad, where every design looks horrible, every decision they make is bad and it breaks canon. You cannot make it, and I'm not going off on a tangent here, but you cannot make a show like this with this production, style, make it look like a 1960s, TV set anymore. You can't.
No, but they could never do that. Even with Enterprise, people were saying, "Well, how come the walls don't look solid with just big blinking buttons?" You can't. Nobody's going to watch something, with plywood sets. They need something. You got to do something more modern. Even with the J.J. Abrams films, again, same argument. Well, everything looks too modern. Everything looks too shiny. It's like, well,
yeah, exactly. And it's not as if the aesthetic is so, jarring where it doesn't look anything like Star Trek. I'm looking at the Enterprise and it looks like the Enterprise. It's a very iconic ship and they kept true to it, very, very closely. But it's just people, are so, set in their ways where they, change is horrible in any aspect.
Oh. I've been surrounded my entire life, in this genre, geeky, nerdy stuff. And I've always had people around me that same argument would keep coming back. Anything gets rebooted, anything gets done. And it's like, oh, it's not mine. Mine was back in this time. And this is just a quick money grab. Nobody cares. I'm like, will you please just watch the show for 5 minutes before you tell me how much you hate it? And it's happened a few times where, again, with Battlestar Galactica, I had people that were bitching and moaning left and right. Oh, how could Starbuck be a woman? What kind of crap is that? And then they watch the show and they love it. It's like, oh my god.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you have to watch it with an open mind. You can't go into it wanting to not hate it. Because then that opens up a whole nother argument where they just pick it apart and and just try to find flaws in it. But.
Yeah. Now, luckily, Star Trek hasn't gone through the more current toxic fandom phenomenon that I've been seeing with like Star Wars, for example, or some major franchises. But so far, so good. Like I said, we've seen the trailers for what's coming next season. The uniforms, we're going to start to see the colors, the reds and the yellows and the blues. So that's exciting as far as I'm concerned. Anytime here's a perfect example where, you can't look exactly like 1960s, but the color palettes are starting to blend a little more towards in that direction. So that's kind of neat too.
Yeah. In fact, right when I saw the trailer, I saw Pike in his, the bright yellow. I was like, okay, like this is good. I thought they were going to hold off a little bit. I thought maybe by season 3 or 4, maybe we'd start seeing it. But no, they right out of the gate, they weren't hiding it. They weren't, just subtly teasing.
I'm like, where are the action figures? I want to see the action figures. Somebody make action figures quick.
I can't wait. I'm still hoping they put out some sort of like, more official Enterprise figures, Star Wars gets all the good figures. Star Trek we never get really good quality Star Trek figures.
They've changed hands to different companies so many times that it's like it's almost like they can never finish what they started because they switch companies and then they got to start from scratch all over again.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to mention about the show, I love the music. I love the theme. One of the things I completely hated about Enterprise, and I don't know if you feel the same way. I'm sorry.
I know
is that opening theme? I absolutely hated it.
I know exactly where you're going. And I'm really glad you brought this up because I was going to mention this actually.
It was like the theme from The Greatest American Hero almost.
Yeah,
it was like, what is this, 1970?
I know. And even though I respect the whole intro to Enterprise because it had like, the shots of, like the...
I like the visuals. The visuals I like.
Cool. It was cool, yeah, but it's just the song every time. It's like,
it was like James Taylor or John Denver. It was this very weird, folky, 60s folky kind of hippy-dippy song. It's like, what? This isn't Star Trek. What's going on here? This music I absolutely love. I don't know why. I think it reminds me, again, of more of the modern Star Trek film music, the Michael Giancano Star Trek theme. But even the music during the show, you mentioned the special effects. I love the aesthetics. I love the darkness. Everything is darker and a little more brooding. And again, when we talked about Marvel versus DC and how I always gravitate towards the darker, the Batmans and that kind of stuff. This show to me is the darkest of all of them. It's kind of creepy dark.
Yeah, and I want to touch on 2 points you brought up. The music, yes, definitely. And in fact, they have the soundtrack to Discovery. Yes. By Jeff Russo. He's the guy who does most of the, in fact, I think all of the whole score for Discovery.
Yes, he's done a lot of work.
He does a fantastic job with another show called Legion. And the music in Legion is just amazing. Like he does all these like renditions of like different songs, like different 60s and 70s like pop culture songs, and just
like he does like synth, like a lot of like synth pop kind of stuff. Like a very 70s electronica kind of weird sounding music. Yeah,
I love his work so much. And Discovery is the same thing where there's no lyrics or anything, but the musical overtones of like blending the classic Star Trek themes with these new, very sci-fi feeling but very Pulp Fiction type feeling to it is really, really fantastic. Your other point we brought up about the lighting and the darkness of the show, that also I cannot agree more with, because the show, except for one episode, except for the episode where the time loop episode, which was more of a fun episode. The episode is very bright. It's more of a fun episode. But the other episodes in the season, everything's very dark. It's very dimly lit. And I can't remember which episode it is, but there's just one shot, and it stands out to me. I don't know why, but it's just one shot in the opening of the show, and it doesn't really have a point. There's no real point to it, but it's a dark lit hallway where all you see is like a worker, engineer, kind of like fixing like a light or something. It's like flickering on and off. It's very grim, very dark, and I don't know why. There's no the show.
It's artistic. That's what it is. It's artsy.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's absolutely no point to it. It doesn't come into play in the story, but it just shows like this light flickering on and off, illuminating the hallway in this very eerie, creepy way. It's the lighting is done very well.
Yeah. So the show started with 15 episodes, and I believe for the second season we're getting 13 episodes, and it's going to start in January. So, as I mentioned before, in whatever manner you can watch the show, watch it. I know it's CBS All Access streaming services, and there's so many streaming services coming, and I don't know exactly what the heck I'm going to do, because CBS, Marvel, Star Wars, Disney, Disney's starting their own thing. If you're going to watch all that Star Wars stuff that's coming, I'm not sure how we're going to do this, because I cannot subscribe to 75 different streaming services. There are ways of watching. That's all I'm going to say. There are ways of watching. It's up to you to figure out how to watch it. And eventually, it's all on DVD, because all this stuff you can rent at the same time. You go to Netflix and rent them.
Oh, yeah. In fact, actually, this is actually perfect timing, because Star Trek Discovery, it just went on sale for Blu-ray yesterday, actually.
Oh, they must have excellent behind-the-scenes and bonus material.
Oh, yeah. It's on my Amazon wish list right now, actually.
Now, before the second season starts, and it's only like 2 more months, I think, or less, they gave us a little treat. They're putting out these little mini episodes to kind of get people, I guess, excited about what's coming. And I'm not entirely sure if these are just one-off type of stories, but I could have swore I read something that we might see more of these characters on future actual episodes. The first episode was about Tilly and her relationship with her mom, and how she discovers an alien presence that ends up being a queen that's hiding from her coronation that's coming. So it was, again, one of these, her becoming friends with somebody where she's like the last person she ever wants to become friends with anybody because she's so weird. What did you think of that first one?
I watched the episode from start to finish twice. The first time I saw it, I actually liked it. I was like, oh, this is actually a pretty good little intro, 15 minutes short. And I really enjoyed it. And then I watched it the second time. I'm like, I don't know. So, and I'm not sure what changed, or maybe I was in a better mood the first time. For what these are worth, they're 15 minutes, so you have to really give it you have to really take it for what it's worth. You can't tell this grand story in 15 minutes, you know.
Yeah. Now, do you remember the beginning where they show you the docking bay and all that? Wasn't that incredible? Again, the effects just completely blew me away.
Yeah. Well, even before that, the first scene was just of the Discovery of Discovery itself, where the shuttle's coming into Discovery, and I was like, oh, here we go again. I love the CGI is just beautiful, and to see Discovery again for the first time, after a few months, it was really great. But yeah, the CGI, and I'm glad even for the shorts, even for these little
they don't skip
shorts,
out on anything.
The production, they're not skipping out.
And now the second one that I watched is a weird one because it takes place, what did they say, 1,000 years later?
Yeah, you find out it's 1,000 years into the future.
In the Discovery, and there's nobody in there. The ship is like an autopilot, but there is a computer, I guess that is new. I guess it's a future version of whatever computer is attached to the ship, kind of like a HAL kind of computer, let's say, that discovers a floating ship that's like an escape pod or something, and they revive the computer revives the person there, and that person ends up being somebody who is someone who escaped from another planet that was having some kind of conflict, and that person is now stuck in the Discovery, and he just wants to get back to his home. But the computer says that, the mission is to stay where they are. She can't really spare any shuttles or anything like that. And little by little, the computer and that individual, they kind of start falling in love with each other because they're the only ones there, and they're constantly talking about their not the computer's family, but his family, and all his experiences that he had. And then at the end, she allows him to leave to get on a shuttle, the last shuttle, and go off in the direction of wherever it is that he was trying to get to, I guess. But we don't know what happens to him.
Yeah, and that's the thing. With these short treks, like, they're really nailing the premise of, setting up a character and some conflict and then sending them on their way, their fate unknown, really. And that leaves the door open for to bring these characters back in the show or, down the road, because both shorts have to do basically with the characters kind of going off to unknown fate, really. But
exactly.
This one was really good. This one, I really enjoyed this one. I knew the premise going into it. I knew there was going to be some sort of AI and the two characters were going to kind of, hit it off, so to speak. And I thought it was going to be kind of, done, very cheesy, the two characters are going to fall in love, like the movie Her or something. But again, 15 minutes we're talking about here. It does a pretty good job in having us, really care about the character. His name is Kraft, by the way.
Yes.
We really care about this guy, and it was really, really interesting. And it was a premise that's been seen before and done before. But as for like, again, a little 15-minute trek, short trek, it really was pretty entertaining. And again, I really hope we see this guy again. I don't think it'd be possible to bring him back into Discovery Season 2, but down the road, I really hope we see a return of him.
Yeah, according to an article I see here, the shorts will also introduce audiences to new characters who may inhabit the larger world of Star Trek. So we might see these guys again. And according to this, one was directed by Rainn Wilson, who also reprises his role from Discovery as Harry Mudd. So the fourth one might be a Harry Mudd related episode, because I think we've kind of seen a preview. Right. The next one is Doug Jones. It's Saru's something to do with Saru's family or his upbringing in his planet or something. So I guess those are the next two.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Now that you mentioned, I can slip my mind before. Yeah, that's right. The last one is going to be a Harry Mudd story. I'm not sure if it's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be a continuation from where we leave him, or it's going to be more of a background.
But it's interesting. He's also directing that particular episode. And like I said, the next one is the backstory of how the Kelpian joined Starfleet. So that's interesting. It's interesting. They don't devote an entire episode, but they do these little shorts. This is fun. You know what? I'll take it. I don't care. I love it. I'll take it all.
Yeah, people are complaining like it's a 15-minute little episode where you can kind of whet your appetite until the bigger season comes out. Like I'm not seeing what's bad about these. I mean, the story isn't going to be Shakespeare or anything, but as for a 15-minute show, it gives you little nuggets to chew on, basically.
Yeah, and the thing that we also have to keep in mind is the fact that we're we're in a different world now. We're in the streaming world. In the streaming world, you don't have 26 episodes anymore.
No.
That is gone. Even the network shows are trying to get away from that too, to save money and to just not to dilute the stories with filler episodes and that kind of thing. Star Trek only has 15 episodes to begin with, and next time around, I think they said 13 or something. So yeah, you're not going to get twice as many episodes. So I'll take whatever they throw at me. They give me some little mini ones. That's fine by me. I'm cool with that.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you said the way TV shows are being shot now, and I think it is very post Game of Thrones, where every episode is basically a little small, a movie basically. I mean, and you have so few episodes now because each episode costs so much. In previous Star Trek, you would have 2 or 3 episodes go by where there'd be filler episodes, or and not necessarily filler in a bad way, but just episodes where not the story didn't need to have this constant churn. You contrast that with Discovery, and Discovery, every episode it means something. Like if you miss one episode, you're going to be lost because every episode is vital to the story.
Right. And these episodes are, like you said, just like Game of Thrones, they're pretty expensive episodes. There is an article here that mentions that the money that they made just from Netflix, because Netflix has the international rights to distribute the show, not CBS. The streaming service is only national, for the U.S. But the money that they made from Netflix alone to do the international distribution, that alone paid for the entire budget of the show. Oh, wow. So anything above that is just gravy. Any money that they're getting from the streaming service is all gravy right now for them. So they're in pretty good hands.
Yeah, which is really good to hear because, again, and I hate to even keep repeating it, but the production is so good. I really hope that continues because, and again, it's like these shows now are just becoming basically movies where they're condensed. They're much higher cost per episode, but you get more. Really bang for your buck. You're basically having a movie streamed, like a 6-hour movie or 7-hour movie, basically streamed to you.
Yeah. So I think we're pretty much in agreement that this is one that we recommend, and we're coming back to it as soon as it returns. And in the meantime, we have 2 more of these little short ones to watch. So thanks, Steve.
Hey, thanks for having me back. I enjoyed it. We definitely got to continue this. Maybe mid-season of Discovery Season 2, we can get together and do a mid-season recap.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed today's show. I'd like to thank Steve for joining me once again, helping me with one of these genre subjects that we all love. And hopefully we will have some more news about more Star Trek. We're almost there. We're almost at the Season 2 premiere and only another month and a half. And we have a couple more short treks to go through before we get there. So on behalf of everybody here, thanks for listening, and we'll see you here soon at GeekFest Rants. Bye-bye, everybody.
Every moment is a test, and everywhere I turn, there's fear.
I'm responsible for 203 lives. I'm tired of deciding which mission is too risky and which isn't, and who lives.
But who dies? Insufficient facts always invite danger, Captain.
And action!
I was raised to believe that service was my purpose.
I see an outsider. A child molded by wisdom and human compassion.
We speak about the objective hardness of the Vulcan heart. Yet how little room there seems to be in yours.
I'm responsible for forging my own path. We all are.
If you would like to subscribe to our show, send us messages, or see video links to some of the topics we talked about today, please visit our homepage at geekfestrants.com or our YouTube channel, Facebook page, or iTunes at GeekFest Rants.
I don't know what we're yelling about!
GeekFest Rants is produced by Carlos Perón, copyright 2018.
This broadcast is part of the IC Robots Radio Network. Visit icrobots.com for this and many other nerd/nostalgia related podcasts. You won't be sorry for long.